Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. Did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 179 with Zach Souza. He is the co-host of the Low Gravity podcast Uncensored. And on that podcast particularly, we talked about his journey through high school, battling injuries in soccer, and working his way back onto the varsity team and how that taught him a lot of life lessons, and talked about his journey through community college and not enjoying that, and then eventually creating the podcast with Junior Lewis, who was also a guest on the podcast. And it was always great for me to talk to other podcasters about why they do what they do and share tips and tricks of what we do. And I just always enjoy that. So if you like that episode, you can go check it out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So this brings me to a really great episode and also a very big episode 180. This is a huge milestone moment coming on for his third appearance on the podcast. Last appeared on episode 147 as well as episode 101. Mark Furtado.
Hey.
Glad to have you back on the pod.
Yeah. Wow. It's going to be almost a year.
Yeah. Last time was in July of last year.
Yeah.
And at that episode, we'd caught up on a lot of stuff. It'd been a long time since that other episode. And then we were like, we've always talked about a possible collab and like trying to figure out a way to like combine our two businesses. And we are here to announce that we've done that today. So we decided for the month of May, that is Mental Health Awareness Month, that we were going to drop some merch. And I'm going to stand up now and show you guys the merch. And if you want to talk about it a little bit as I'm standing up, feel free to do that. The logo. We got that Mental Health Matters in the back. Had to show you guys what it looked like. We decided to wear it for the pod, and I'm very excited about this merch. This is really over a year in the making that we kind of started talking about this, and we were just kind of teasing stuff and throwing some ideas, and I'm really happy with the fact that we were able to combine the brands too in the back of the logos and have my backdrop colors as well as yours kind of included into it. It really does feel like a collab, and I just want to say thank you for being willing to create this. This is really great.
You're welcome. And then again, I probably switched up the designs like 3 times.
Yeah, we were going back and forth on some stuff.
Yeah. It was one of those moments at night where I was just like, oh wait, I can totally switch this up, make it better. And then I'm like, wait, no, I can make that better. And then here we are.
And then we got the design. We decided, I'm glad we went with the sweatshirts. And the color, I'm very happy with what we created, and it's only going to be available for May. So this is a limited time. Get it while you can. And I'm going to be plugging everything on Instagram throughout the month. I'll have it on my Facebook as well. You could purchase this only at the Artisan website. I don't know if you want to plug that right now.
Oh, okay.
We can plug it at the end too.
That I was planning to plug at the end, but so it's the artisan-nb.com.
Yes, and we'll plug this at the end of the episode as well for you guys. And I'm just super excited and super grateful that we did this. So please support both of our brands. Please go and purchase this. This is really great stuff here. So to the episode. So Mark, we have some catching up to do, talking about this past little less than a year, but kind of talk to me about some of the stuff that you've been working on and how life's been going for you.
Let's see. You photographed with me for fall. I remember that. We ended up going to Rhode Island for that one. That was fun. That was our what do you call it? Camp, like the camp kind of like vibe that we were going for. And then from there I went through with the Save the Arctic collection that I've always been planning for years now, and actually put it to fruition for winter. and then I went on a hiatus. I mean, not really. I just wanted a break from both reality and the artisan realm, just because I felt like I was being pulled in every direction as the solo act of, when it comes to owning a business solo, but I honestly don't regret it. It it showed me a lot of things. I know that sounds cheesy, but like I think finally found what it means to like establish boundaries. It's easy for someone to say, "Oh, just like cut someone off or even just mute your phone here and there." Honestly, it's a lot more than that. It's more of a mental strength to have than it is a physical strength of simply putting silent on your phone or do not disturb. So I will admit that was an epiphany in itself. Uh, Obviously, I had to still show up for my 401k job and like work like normal, but I was able to like not bring homework with me or like the stress behind my job. And then I was able to separate the artisan brand from my day job because normally I would work on like any future designs there if I was bored. And I was like, nope, I'm just gonna leave that at my artisan office, and then whatever is at work, and then when I go home, that's it. Do nothing, just either watch Netflix or just touch into reality again and stay away from social media. So that was actually kind of fun. Uh, During that hiatus, I kind of wanted to basically expand the business, but back, I think if I were to talk to myself to a year ago, if I were to take my current self and talk to a year ago self, I would have said expansion doesn't mean quantity. It it would have been what other umbrella would you want to go under? So at the time I was in 3 locations with the business with clothing. Um I had to step away from one of the locations. It's not that I couldn't keep up with it. I just felt always stressed of making sure that that store was stocked, this store was stocked, and the other one, or like not putting 100% of me in all 3 locations. So I had to step away, step down from one of the stores. Luckily, were very graceful with me. Like they were like, "Yeah, no, we totally get it." Um, and when I stepped down, that's when I started thinking of, well, lifestyle isn't just clothing. Why don't I have an in-house brand under the business? And I'm like, where can I go with lifestyle? And I've always been a fan of home fragrances, don't get me wrong. Like every time when I go to a Marshall's, TJ Maxx, I always end up taking home like a room spray or a candle at that. Um, but that's when I had the vision of taking the brand to a more commercial level. So I would have the clothing as its own entity, and the candles would be the home fragrance would be its own entity, aka the pink scallop, which I'll talk about it now. So over the hiatus, I came up with the idea of why don't I have my own in-house fragrance brand that would be sold under the artisan. So it'll still be affiliated with each other, but have its own separate branding. Um, just like no different with who's similar with that. Like back in the day, I would remember like Pier One would do it with their own stuff. Like they wouldn't import other brands; they would make their own versions of it. Or even like with Bath and Body Works, they didn't have candles back in the day. They were just simply body gels, body lotions, and sanitizers. Now they expanded to candles and all that stuff. Um, so my vision was take the word lifestyle and put it as the big major umbrella, but have clothing and then lifestyle home fragrance and then any other umbrella that would come after that or any other businesses. But for now, in my head, I took expansion as I'd I would have to saturate myself locally with my clothing in multiple locations. And that's when I started to see the stress and I was like, no, I can't keep up with that mentally. Physically, I can easily stock locations. It's just a matter of bringing them and then presenting them on displays. But I was like, this isn't totally me. So that's when I called up my friend Kayla and I was like, hey, would you be up for this idea? Would you be able to help me execute this whole pink scallop idea? Because her and I have gone on adventures in the past. Like we've gone to the vineyard, we've gone to Wareham, we've gone. She's gone to Nantucket. That's my next goal, but she's been around a lot more. Um, so I presented her with the idea. I gave her some like test mock-ups of what the branding would look like like basically like AI generated like candle labels and stock photos. So I gave her the idea, and I'm like, it would be a sister brand to the Artisan, but nothing. It wouldn't be like how do I say this? It would have its own personality. Like they're sisters, but they're in the same family, but they're not together. And so she was totally for it, and we started making tests. We like test scents. We spent a day just like blending oils. Like we sat down. It was like I want to say 4 hours. One night it was on a Friday night. We went to her house and we were like, okay, let's pull out all the essential oils. Let's look at some blends. Let's look at some popular scents that people usually blend oils with, and then go from there. That's where we came up with the first scent, Menemsha Sunset. I personally wanted to make a bonfire beach smell, and we came up with it. I think on the first try, we added, I think, maybe 1 or 2 drops extra of whatever the ingredients is, but that came to life, and then that's where the other two fragrances came in because we started talking about like, oh well, when we went on this adventure, like we smelled this, we smelled that. Like I remember the day photographically well, and that's where we have 3 signature scents. We have a bonfire on the beach profile scent, which is Menemsha. We have um, Makepeace Bog, which is basically a cranberry heavy scent, but not holiday ish. Because that was one thing I wanted to put out was I wanted to take frosted cranberry from Bath and Body Works, but make it an all season scent and strip away from like the pine and the balsam oils and just make it. I wanted to take oil like an oil that would accentuate it like orange and cinnamon, but take it to the all season route. And then the last one was Sanctity Skies, which is the name. They're all named after locations. And since Kayla went to Nantucket, she was like, "Well, I remember going to Sanctity Lighthouse," and I was like, "When you were there, was it like fresh air? Was it a sea breeze? Was it like an ocean breeze? Like like what do you remember?" And she was like, "Honestly, it just smelled like fresh air, like almost like a Sea Island cotton kind of vibe." And I was like, "How about this? Well, let's take the stereotypical fresh linen smell and elevate it to another level." So it's basically like sophisticated, I should say. And that's where we started researching ingredients. All of the candles are 100% organic essential oils with soy blend wax. They're all wood wicks as well. We have the 7-ounce jars, the 4-ounce mini candles, and then we also have car fresheners and room sprays, but also we started doing car fresheners. So those will only be limited at the store in Dartmouth, which is 3 Gen Love. Our brand is exclusively with them at the Dartmouth location. Uh, but I will admit that was like the best decision I've made it really brought out another side of me because Kayla's more of the chemist. I'm just the branding, marketing slash brain behind the project. And it not only brought my friendship closer with Kayla, it kind of sparked a new idea of what expansion is. Like, you don't have to be in multiple places. You can just expand your idea and make it better. So that's how the pink scallop came into fruition. The scallop really doesn't have a symbolic meaning, unlike the artisan with a whale tail, but the scallop shell, when we designed it, we came up with the pink scallop because they're technically mostly rare around New Bedford anyway. But Kayla's favorite color is pink, and I was like, I like navy. We'll combine them both. And honestly, the scallop shell is a lot more playful. So I was like, how about this? The pink scallop can be a fun and sophisticated version of what the relaxed clothing line is. So it has its own personality. So it's been fun. Um, and then that's where it's so funny when I launched the pink scallop. I've been sitting on this thought for a long time. Technically, it came to my head of what I'm gonna say a year ago. I think maybe 2 months before episode 147. I just never gave it any attention because in my head I wanted to challenge myself and just say, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. Um, but recently now I gave it attention and now it's a full circle kind of moment because it makes sense of the decision I'm gonna make. So the artisan brand now will be rebranded and relaunched in the summertime. It's still gonna be the same foundation. It's still gonna be the same values and the same idea of lax, easy to wear clothing. It's just the name is actually gonna change. So the artisan is gonna be almost like the top corporate kind of umbrella. And then under the artisan branding, it would be the pink scallop. And then the clothing is actually going to be called Baleen Bay. So the clothing brand will actually have not only a connection to the whale's tail, but it actually keeps the integrity of what the brand actually is. And it's a lot more sophisticated. I will admit, seeing the branding that I've done with it so far before the summer launch, that's coming up, but making that decision actually like boosted my spirits up a little bit because I should again talking to if I were to talk to myself a year ago, I should have done it when I had the chance, when that idea came into fruition. And I will admit, it's almost like that cheesy saying where you should have listened to your gut kind of thing. I should have at the time, but I didn't want to discourage myself because I was going down that rabbit hole of, well, I've already been doing this for 4 years. People associate me with this brand. Why am I going to change now when I've been doing it for 4 years when I could have done it when I should have changed it a year into the game where people still didn't know me? But then I went down that other branch of thinking of, well, now I look bad changing my name every year because people are not going to, there wouldn't be any consistency. But since I've established a good brand idea, but also client customer base and social media, I guess, presence, it makes sense to make the shift now, 4 years after being in the game, because now that I've shifted the name, it actually made me more creative with how I want to do things. Like my summer launch was already pre-planned, but what I have in store. But changing the name actually made me design more to add. So I went from having 10 designs for just t-shirts to now like 16. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then now that I'm building the new website, well, it's still gonna be the same, I guess, what do you call it? Like theme when it comes to like Shopify language, but now that now that I've invested my money in the right spaces after being in the game for so long, because I've done everything myself. Like I've designed my own website, I've designed my own social media platform. Like when it comes to the branding and the promotional work, like I've been the only one doing it, trying to execute what I want. Now that I've invested my money into the right spaces for people to help me to optimize my ideas, it's been the best decision because not only does Bailey and Bay look good right now, I kind of had that epiphany, like how we talked about before we started the podcast. Like, oh, like I remember when I created this, like I had that moment of feeling accomplished and like, oh, like it was kind of like a legendary kind of moment. Seeing what progress I've made before the launch of Bailey and Bay, and like seeing it like a preview of it, like I've never been more excited than when I first started, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like I love what I've done. Like I'm not saying what I've done, like I'm not trying to discourage my progress at all and like how I started, because I started with a cricket machine and I had this idea of a brand at that point, but now seeing myself and like the steps that I made and knowing what the game entails when it comes to the clothing aspect, I feel like now I can give the customers what they want, but also how I want to at the same time, like how I can take the brand and also be present more with it than how I was with the artisan. Because I don't get me wrong, I like the way the artisan was. I kind of had like this mysterious persona. No one knew who it was. I was kind of afraid to be out on camera a little bit with it. But now having both brands who are affiliated with each other, but under the same umbrella, but also on the promotional side, it kind of intimidated me a little bit, but I pushed myself off that cliff, and I'm kind of glad that I've listened to my intuition about this whole rebranding, but also expansion work than how I was a year ago, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different avenues that we could take with this.
Mm.
And I was really excited when you first announced the pink scallop
Yeah.
because to see the growth of taking that new leap
Mm,
into a completely new endeavor
mm,
where it's a sister company but it's got its own, like you said, personality, it's its
mm,
own thing.
mhm,
And I think that's really cool, and we had a really great conversation off podcast of kind of where I am with this podcast
mm,
and where I see it going forward. um Obviously the goal for people that are listening, they definitely know 200 is like the goal.
mhm.
And I have a side project that I'm not talking about. I call it the project on
Yep.
here, but that is kind of like my comparison when I think of what you're kind of
Mhm,
going through right now and what you've created is you didn't want to completely change your main thing, but you wanted to add to it. And now that you've added something to it, you're kind of coming back to the thought of like, what can I do to like improve what I've
mhm,
created? Because you're not changing the identity completely with your brand. You're improving it to
mhm,
allow for more growth too. Like you're
mhm,
setting up yourself to, who knows, maybe there's a third sister business that comes down the line
mhm.
that could be incorporated
Yep.
with this entire brand. And the whole idea of being associated with oceans or sea life, and
Mhm.
like I could see the vision, and then I could see a home store
Yep.
somewhere where you have all these different sister businesses uh, all together in this location,
Mhm.
but they're all, you could buy them in different locations, but there's a one unit where, or
Yep.
one store where you could shop all, for all the different brands. Like I could see the
You
vision.
know what's so weird now that you've said that? So when I proposed the idea to Kayla, no one's gonna believe me on this, I swear to you, but this is how it actually came out. So it's gonna sound like I'm on some sort of trip, but I'm not. It came to me in a dream. Basically, long to make a long story short, I somehow was walking past this empty leased out retail space used to be an old Emblems. I don't even know what location in Massachusetts it would be, but that's how I saw it, and then all of a sudden I went to like some sort of portal. Again, I'm not on LSD, I'm not on shrooms. This is just how it came out in my dream. And all of a sudden I was transported to a store, like how you just said it. It had both the clothing and it had the pink scallop branding into it. And it was actually the pink scallop store that was actually based on the vineyard. And it was this old theater that's still there right now in Martha's Vineyard, but somehow I ad- adapted that space, renovated it to make it look so cool that when you walk in, like like the if I could like translate the dream into like a whole scenic like AI thing, it would make sense. But basically, it came to me into a dream, and then as the branding came through with the pink scallop, I went one night to AI, and I was like, "Let me see if I can try to translate the dream into, like, a photo." And I will admit, it wasn't too shabby with what AI came up with. It wasn't what the dream entailed, but if the pink scallop had their own store just solely off of the fragrances, I don't mind the cabana look, like, how it came off. Like, I have photos here, and it was kind of I kinda had that, like, "Oh, shit" moment, like, that could be me one day. Like, I could have a location like that.
It's interesting that you could use AI to help visualize or create a
Yeah.
visualization where some people have better minds to visualize than others, but
Yeah.
to be able to use that tool to create the image of your dream essentially in some form or fashion might not be the exact thing like you said, but to
Mhm.
create the picture and to be able to
Mhm.
see that. And like, I mean, I just randomly thought of an idea. I mean, you could take it and run with it. I'm not going to
Yeah.
copyright this, but like under that umbrella, you could even like, obviously you've gone with the whole sea life and sea creature type of vibe to it. I could easily see something that you do for turtles and just create like cups or something and
Yeah.
just like have reusable
Mhm.
straws and all that. And there's a
Mhm.
whole, there could be a whole business
Oh,
off of that.
yeah.
Like there's so many different ways that you could take different things and correlate to different animals or
Oh,
different
yeah.
parts of the ocean. But I wanted to go back towards one of the earlier points that you were talking about setting boundaries,
Mm.
because I thought that was a really great point that we kind of not like glossed over because obviously you're catching up on stuff, but
Yeah.
I feel like that's an important topic to hit on because when it comes to setting boundaries, I think it's super important when you're creating your brand, your business, to
Mhm.
whatever it is, to know your limits with it,
Yeah.
to not allow other people to take advantage of what you do. Because if
Yeah.
you allow other people to control and dictate
Yeah.
what you want to do with your thing, it could set you up for complete failure and steer you on courses that might
Mhm.
not be for you. And luckily, I think it's important to correct that ship and to go through those issues where you're gonna encounter people that are probably not great for your business or your
Yeah.
brand, but they're gonna help you get back to where you need to,
Yep.
especially when you have the creative mind, because
Mhm.
you're gonna eventually realize this is not who I am or what I want to be about.
Right.
And to set up healthy boundaries to be like, no, I'm gonna do what I want to do and
Yeah.
stick to your morals and your
Mhm.
brand identity. And I think that's I think an important value that I've seen in your growth
Mm.
with your brand since even before you came on this podcast when I first got to know
Mm.
you, to see you grow into your like your ownership of your brand and
Mm.
to see you create multiple businesses. It's the growth is
Mm.
it's there. It's obvious for me.
Mm.
I mean, obviously I interview you and talk to you
Yeah.
off podcasts and stuff like that, but to see it like come to fruition and to see the vision, like, I can see your vision, like, I could see it
Mm.
because also you've put in a lot of work to chase that dream too, like, this
Mhm.
didn't just like you said, just didn't happen, like
Right.
and especially when you're not changing your name every year, and I don't know if was that is that kind of breaking news to kind of announce that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
kinda figured, I was like, that's kind of
Yeah.
exclusive news.
Yeah, like, I will admit, it's like I said, it's the same foundations, it's the same morals, like, the whole "say kind, make waves" kinda thing. I may have changed it up to, like on the branding aspect, it's like high tides, good vibes kinda thing.
But why change it? I'm kinda curious to, like, what's the drive? Is it to better put it under umbrella with the whole like, you have the pink scallop to have, like, that, like, kind of
Mm,
similar name almost to it, like, where it's got, like, a there's, like, a theme that you could kind of build off that? Is that kind of the
yeah,
thought process?
technically, like, we're still gonna donate to the oceans, like, it's not like I said, nothing is really changing it besides the name and maybe the look visually by the website and social media aspect. But on like some parts of the branding, when I came up with the Baleen Bay thing, um, I started including like high tides, good vibes, just because it's easily to translate and easier to be marketable. I only say that when it comes to like design work. Like it's easy to put like stay kind, make waves kind of thing, or like like do what I did in the previous past with making designs based off of that. But I guess when when I saw the preview of what the future website would look like, I just knew that the whole high tides, good vibes would be easier for the customer to understand, but also the stay kind, make waves can be a business moral than it is a customer moral, if that makes sense. Like usually customers would just go buy a shirt and that's it. Where I want the personality of Baleen Bay to be about this having fun, spreading good vibes, but also um making it more commercial, I guess is what I'm trying to come out of it is I feel like Baleen Bay would be easily marketable than how I've been doing it just on a design aspect. But there's nothing that's going to be missing from what I've done in the past. It's just the name is going to change. But like I said, I have no regrets now seeing what I've been doing with it. Um it's I like I said I had that epiphany and it kind of like it hit me harder than how I started for some reason. It was just I guess the wisdom that I've grown since I started coming out into like this new, I guess, path that I'm paving. I guess maybe I sound a little too high, but like it, I don't know. It makes it feel full circle. But along the way, I did have to set boundaries, though. Like to go back to your question, it's be taking that hiatus. Not only did my business suffer for a couple months, I'd rather take the loss profit-wise for my sanity. But along building the artisan brand, I realized I should have set boundaries in certain places that I didn't, but I don't regret my decisions when building and establishing the artisan brand. But now learning from those experiences and the connections that I've have now, like I'm so grateful for that. Um, I'm taking that with me when launching the whole new rebranding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
It's because you have to grow through what you go through. It's kind of
yeah.
a corny
Oh, yeah,
cliche, but like it's really true. Like
yeah,
the things that we go through in life ultimately get us to where we need to. And
yeah,
without going through all these different trials and tribulations you
mhm,
have with your brand, you wouldn't be at the place where you could pivot like this
yep,
because you learned all these things along the way to now prepare you for where you want to go. And it's not like changing is going to completely erase what you've gone through,
right,
erase what you created. It's only going to enhance it. And I
yeah,
think that is a great message for people is like I've talked a lot about pivoting, and
yeah,
pivoting is such an important piece of life cuz like you have to be willing to change with your stuff. Like if you're going to create new things, you got to be willing
yeah.
to change on it.
If anything, I was more fearful of I wasn't fearful of the actual doing it, I was fearful of the unknown that would come after that, because obviously bumping into people, if I do the relaunch, people are gonna be like, "Oh, but weren't you this, but not now you're that," kinda thing. But I've learned to cope with it now with I've been mentally preparing myself for the relaunch when it comes to that kind of level. But honestly, I've been a lot better now than when I first started. Obviously, like I have the connections that I have, but spiritually, I feel a lot better because not only does it feel like me, but I know that this relaunch will make both businesses stand out, but it it'll just be easily translatable. If that like I'm trying to come up with a good word. Like it'll be easier to understand not only for the customer, but it'll visually translate through social media and through other people. Um, and like I said, I've envisioned a whole store about it. I mean, I've envisioned a store in general with my stuff, but going with the Baleen Bay route, it could be like I don't want to say like another Vineyard Vines or another Simply Southern or even like another um what do you call it? Hollister kind of vibe. That's not like what I'm trying to look like, but their intentions of having clothing, fragrances, accessories, and this and that. That's like my intention. But what stands out from myself with the relaunch compared to those brands, granted, I know they're bigger than me and they have a lot of investors. It's there's authenticity in it, but it's catered to everyone rather than just a certain look, if that makes sense. Like I feel like with Hollister and those other brands are geared towards the surfer, like the blonde, blue-eyed surfer vibe. That's totally not what I'm trying to go for. I'm trying to go for a more coastal, like coastal, effortless, fun kind of vibe, I guess I should say. Like I want people to associate when they see the brand personally. It's not only they like they have a personality behind it, but it feels more authentic and feels more personable. Like yeah, I'll still do some what do you call it? Like motivational shirts or like affirmation shirts like how I used to do in the past or make it have it some sort of tie to the brand and how it is. But now that I've been designing for Baleen Bay and how like just for the summer, I just know it'll be so much more mm, exciting, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and I as you're talking about this and talking about the relaunch and talking about the new brand, I sense the excitement.
Mm,
And that is so important when you're talking about a lot of this stuff and
mhm,
when you're talking about your passions in
yeah,
general is to feel that excitement about it because people
mhm,
always talk about when you start to lose that joy for what you're doing,
mhm,
it might be time to take a step back or take a time to reevaluate what you're doing because
mhm,
if you're not happy with what you're doing, if it's
yeah,
not as fun as it once was and it's maybe feeling like a job versus like a
mhm,
passion, that's when you need to reevaluate things.
yeah,
And what it sounds like is this kind of relit this fire, and
yeah,
also it kind of seems like the fire might be burning hotter than it's ever been,
yep,
based on what you're talking
mhm,
about, and like it's all that stuff you've learned, and then lighting this new flame with the new business also is helping
mhm,
spark this creation to dive back into the original brand and say, hey, we could pivot this and
mhm,
make this something more authentically me.
mhm.
And that's what it seems like. It's like, are you having fun with it?
Oh yeah, oh hands down. Like now, like preparing for summer and like pulling pieces and make like I'm easily inspired as it is when it comes to like graphic design and all that. But when it's time to pull for certain, I guess, categories like for hoodies, swimwear, and all that stuff, it's making me more excited to be not only courageous with the colors, like whatever I'm feeling, but it's it's letting me take the business into multiple directions when it comes to like the photography or even just how I want the Instagram to look, or even as simple as how I want it to be on a business card or just a brochure. It's making just me more excited than ever because it is me. Like I I feel like it's been a running theme from my past 2 episodes where it's like authenticity, this, that. And now looking back on those episodes, I'm like, damn, I was so naive. I wasn't feeling in the right space, or I could just tell that something was going on headspace wise. Now I feel more in control, not only of both businesses, but of myself.
How do you feel being able to look back on those episodes and then
Mhm.
compare that to where you are now? Because I think this is an interesting chance to dive into that thought
Mm.
process and that comparison, and also with the authenticity piece.
I will admit, like the first episode, I had no expectations because I've hopped around a couple podcasts, but like when it came to yours, when it came to just like talking about me, it was kind of like that saying, if you're uncomfortable, then uh, it's a good thing kind of mentality. So I will admit, not that you made me uncomfortable, it was just uncomfortable to like relive not relive, bring up the past self and like what I've gone through. And then with the second episode, it was like, oh, it's just a part two of like what I was going through and then what my plans are. But now where I've been, it's been like I don't how do I'm trying to like articulate this correctly. I'm glad I went through the experiences that I went through, but now where I've been and what life has taught me now, I wish I would have told myself sooner where it's like, "Okay, chill out, take a break, it's okay." But also make sure that it comes off as you, like, in when it comes from yourself. Because at the end of the day, the branding is just a pedestal, but in order for you to put yourself out there, you have to do the work, not the brand itself. Like you can't rely on just the visuals. You kind of have to put yourself out there a little bit. So I will be now being where I am. It's been fun. I mean, it's I'm having a blast with like the last couple weeks I'm gonna be with the artisan. It'll probably be until June, and then July is gonna be like the tentative date to relaunch everything. But it now with the rebranding and the relaunching and all that, not only do my models feel great with the whole idea, but I can just tell that they're excited for me and excited for the future, but also like the photos will translate itself. Like granted, I love my models, they're great. They know what I want when it comes to the photos, like just candid, fun, and fresh. But now with the whole relaunch, I think they understood the assignment. Like they're like, "Oh, that's what you wanted this whole time," and I'm like, "Yeah." I just didn't know how to translate it visually from my head. But I will admit, looking back on those episodes, like I'm proud of myself that I've been putting myself out there now. I should have done it since episode 101. Don't get me wrong, but that hiatus really was like a woke era for me. Like setting boundaries, making sure that I'm not losing my sanity, that I'm doing things for the right reasons, but also to not be afraid to take a chance on the new business idea. Because I told Kayla, I was like, if it flops, it flops. Like, I'm not mad about it. I just wanted to take a chance because I know I could pursue this, but stand out amongst the other local candle brands or local fragrances that are out there. Because I even tried to look into locally if there's any brands that are established, I guess I should say, not just through Etsy. Um, and there's not really much out there. There's probably maybe one or two. So me hopping into the game on that side of the industry, it's a learning curve because it is a science behind it, but it having that scientific aspect to not only the analytical business aspect, it's making it challenging but also exciting because then I can be like, oh, I want to execute this, and it's more hands on than just designing something on my phone or my iPad, I should say.
Yeah, the excitement is like clearly there. Like as you're going through this and talking about it, it's very obvious that you're it's challenging you in a different way because
Yeah.
obviously it's a completely different business
Yep.
in terms of what you're selling to customers. And I think it's cool to all, and this might be a piece where I incorporate incorporate it into future podcasts is people asking them what they thought about that episode
Mhm.
after they've come back on. And
Mhm.
I've never really, for some reason, I guess I didn't think about it
Mhm.
until we started talking about it. But like, it's it's a tool
Yeah.
essentially. I've always said that this podcast is going to have its value 5, 10 years
Oh, yeah.
down the road, to be able
Yeah.
to look back at the old stuff and to see where you once were, because like
Like, I will admit, when our episodes would come out, I would watch it as soon as it came out and, like, watch it through YouTube and, like, see how my actions were and all that stuff. But then the next day I would I would listen to it on my way to work and listen to it on my lunch break. But then I wouldn't listen to those episodes at all after that. But then a couple months later or a couple weeks go by and I'm like, let me go back to my episode, or like when I first came on. I'm like, I like have these mental notes. I'm like, if I was on the podcast right now, I would say it differently. Like, if anything, why did I say that, or why am I going through that? That was just so stupid. Because obviously, future self is, you already learned how to cope with that issue. So that's why I'm like going back through the old episodes. I'm like, I could have easily healed myself with what I know now, but it is what it is. It's I'm not. I guess I'm not mad about it, of how I've been proceeding with this whole thing with now with both businesses, but just even on my own self, like, there's still issues that I deal with on a daily basis that I still am trying to, like, heal from or even just cope with. But looking back on those old episodes, I should have just done this, or I should have just done that, like how I did myself a couple weeks later. So it was like, it's almost like watching, what do you call it? Like, your old footage when you were little. So that was like the vibe that I got, like, watching my old episodes. I'm like, wow, where was I? I'm like, that's me.
that's like my hope for it
Yeah.
is like, because obviously we were talking about off podcasts about like where I see the ceiling in terms of like
Mm,
viewership and things of that nature. But being able to share this with people in the future and to be like, this is where I was
mm,
here, and to
mhm.
you could even, you never know, you blow up big and you could clip a point of you in the first podcast, maybe struggling to articulate something
Yeah,
in your past, to you having your own business and
yeah.
talking about it in future podcasts. We don't even know where this goes, but like, I always value having those initial conversations, because you don't think during those conversations how you're articulating yourself. You
Right,
want to come in and try your best,
right.
but like,
I mean, this is totally unscripted, so, like, for me to go out, like, improv this whole thing, I mean, not improv, like, the intention, but, like, putting it into, like, articulated words, that's a skill I need to work on, but I like it also brings a form of reality, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, usually when I do stuff with my business and I'm being told to do a presentation on it or present it to a group of people, I have, like, advanced notice to, like, work on a script and all that stuff. But what I loved about this platform, it's you scrap the script and it's just put you on the pedestal and not what you want people to look at you. Well, no, you don't like you don't want what we think the fans would want, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Right? Did that make sense?
yeah,
It made
yeah.
sense in my head.
I'm
It made
letting you
sense in
cook.
my
I'm letting you cook it,
Yeah.
because that's the one
Yeah.
thing I don't try to force people to say things or do things
Yeah.
that's going to be uh, received by others. I
Yeah.
want people to just talk how they talk and be who they are. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want people to be something because there's a camera in front of you. Like,
Exactly. Yep.
the whole goal is always, that's why I try to spend like an hour with people before a podcast to try to get them comfortable, to
Mhm.
ease the edge, because you come down and you see cameras and lights, and for some
Mhm.
people this is the first time they're doing it. They can be
Exactly.
very nervous, and
Yeah.
I don't want that to always completely show, because obviously the
Mhm.
first 10 minutes it's going to show for some people, like
Mhm.
it happens. And I had someone a couple weeks ago that was like very camera shy, very
Mhm.
nervous, and I had to kind of really walk them through the podcast. And
Mhm.
I really appreciated them being willing to do something like that, because getting behind the camera and talking about why you do what you do is
Mhm.
so fucking hard to do, and
Mhm.
put yourself out there because I'm
Mhm.
going to promote it. I'm going to push it because this is
Mhm.
my content, obviously.
Right.
So to be willing to come on a platform to talk about yourself and sometimes in ways that is not flattering, you're talking about
Right.
your life story and traumas sometimes, and
Mhm.
getting that out there for someone to learn from essentially is can be scary. But
Yeah.
I love the fact that every guest comes on here
Mhm.
and is willing and embraces that challenge.
Mhm.
And being able to go back and compare and listen to your old episodes and prepare
Yeah.
for this stuff is always a cool tool.
I mean, there's moments where I'm like, "Oh, I wish I could just, like, edit." Like, if I could edit my verbiage, I would, and, like, have it come off articulated, but then that's when I'm like, "You know what? Like, who gives a shit?" They'll to those who will understand what I'm trying to say.
That's why I've just never wanted to be scripted. I never
Yeah.
wanted to edit too much. Like
Yeah.
I just I tell you, I do this for every episode. Obviously, the first episode's a little more scripted than
Yeah.
others because I give out. We're talking about life stories, but I give kind of a rundown of what the stuff I kind of want to talk about with people, and then we
Mhm.
just fucking shoot the shit and see where it goes. Like,
Yeah.
there's no script to it. The only overarching point is life, passions, and mental health has kind of always been the
Yeah.
motto. And I think when you go into it just trying to have a genuine conversation with
Oh,
someone, it's
yeah.
real.
I mean, not to plug this now, but, like I said, when we did 147 off the podcast, I'm like, "Oh, I've had the designs for a mental health." Oh my god, I can't even speak. A mental health awareness collection, but then that's when the connection was made. Well, why don't we just do a collaboration together for next year? And that's now here we are.
Yeah, and I was so excited because like I've been trying to do some type of clothing collab
Mhm.
with someone, and it just made so much
Oh,
sense
yeah.
obviously to do it with you. And we've had so many great conversations, whether it's when I modeled for you or just in prior
Yeah.
podcast rooms, and just getting to
Mhm.
know you over the last several years has been a blessing because now we're
Mm.
able to
Mhm.
combine our talents
Mhm.
in some form or fashion and share that with people, and
Right.
hopefully it's received in a great way, and I think it will be because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
for a great cause essentially.
Yeah.
But I think being able to this is like the base root, like positive, like takeaway from this podcast is the connections. Like this is like
Mhm.
the whole point is to be able to collab and share and
Right.
tricks and trades with people and see
Mhm.
what you can learn.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like you never know who's listening and who cares to
Mhm.
learn something from your story.
Right.
And that's the always the ultimate value of
Mhm.
podcasting is just it's the ultimate like form of storytelling and essentially.
Mhm.
And I was talking last week with my guest Zach, and obviously he has his own podcast, like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode. And he's like, one of the best things that I take away from the podcast is just no phones,
Mhm.
straight conversation for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, however long it goes for. And
Mhm.
it's like, how many times do you really get to do that in real life anymore?
Right.
It's very rare. So like
Oh,
to be
yeah.
able to do this and have this space, and you're talking about trying to articulate your points. Like, I mean, this is episode 180. I've done this 180 times.
Yeah.
So like I've learned how to better like articulate myself and communicate myself. Like if you go back to episode 1, I'm stumbling, bumbling, trying to figure out how to fucking say shit.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm pretty good at like
Mhm.
effective communicator with trying to get
Yeah.
my point across. But you learn through that. And to add to this, to let you go off this point, is you talked about putting yourself out there,
Mhm.
like the face of the brand and getting your face out there. And I think that's so important
Mhm.
for your audience to see who you are. So like kind of go into that a little bit is like breaking out of that shell of
Mhm.
like you want to promote the brand, let the brand be the brand, but
Yeah.
you have to be the voice of the brand. You are the brand. So like how do you I guess advise people on breaking out of that, like maybe it's an insecure introvert shell to be the face of your brand?
You know what's crazy? So, what I guess when I pushed myself off the cliff of putting myself out there on my own personal Instagram about, um, the spring collection, so I've been actually following a lot of, um, I guess you would call them independent reps of all these, like, MLMs, basically. It's an MLM, but with great benefits. Half the time you go on incentive trips, and then half the time the product is really good, at least for the ones I've been following, they're really cool, but also I've been following this specific rep who she's actually a retired school teacher. She was a second grade teacher for decades in the state of New York, and um, she I stumbled upon her, I think in January on my TikTok through through my For You page, and obviously I was intrigued because like a chaotic moment happened during the live, and I was like, you know what? Let me sit through this. Let me see like what how it turns out. And next thing you know, she's promoting a product. She's like talking about it. It's not her product, but it's the company's product. But she's talking about like her personal experiences with it, how she started, and then at the end of the live, she goes, "Oh, join me on Sunday for my business Q&A. So in case if you ever want to do this, or if you want to have any business questions in general, like you can sit on the live and type me questions, and you'll get entered into a raffle." Yada yada yada. So then Sunday comes. I'm sitting through this business live, and I learned a lot. Granted, I know I went to high school for business. I've went to college for business. But when it comes to building your own business in general, it's a lot of work, but you decipher the work or you decipher the amount of work you want to put into it. Yes, there is a goal at the end of the day when it comes to sales. Yeah, but you have to appreciate to talk to the public. That's just the first rule of thumb. You have to be able to be comfortable to put yourself out there and be relatable. You don't have to have a specific message, but just for you to interact with humans in general, not just saying customers, but for you to be approachable, I guess is the key point that she was trying to like insinuate. Like when she goes live, she sells her products, and then that's when, as she's selling, like showing people like what they bought, that's where it prompts more people. And then she talks about her own personal stories and how she started in the game. And I will admit, I took a journal one day after following that business live. I started taking some notes, and I'm like, I could probably use that for my own business. Like, granted, I know I'm not an MLM, but like some of what she has learned, and she also had experience with two other direct sales businesses. So she kind of already had a lot of experiences that she didn't want to happen to other newer people in the game. And so that's when I started taking notes. And then all of a sudden, when the spring collection got revealed, and I'm like, you know what? I want to do what she does. Just do like a whole video revealing the whole collection. It may not be a live stream like how she does it, but let me just do like one big video, just going one by one, talking about each single product and just promoting it from there. Just like how the company does with their own social media. And I'm just like, you know what? I can honestly keep this going. And then that's where I kind of had that moment when I started posting the videos. I'm like, wow, like maybe they're onto something. Or maybe it's just I've never I guess revealed that part of the business aspect that I thought I knew. I just simply thought you would easily have a platform, obviously a point of sale site, and then just easily posting on social media just to get the customers. But it's actually a lot more than that. Yeah, you can be saturated in other stores and I guess pay for Instagram ads and all that. But that going through the algorithm doesn't have that human aspect, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. There's no sense of relatability or even authenticity, I should say. So for these reps to come out to not only speak of their own personal experiences with whatever they're selling, they also talk about like what's going on in their lives and how they've also have gone through what they've gone through, because half the time they either have a mission and why they're selling what they're selling, but um I guess the rep that I've been following, she flat out says you don't have to buy this specific product. This is just what I've learned in the game. And it was very informative, I guess I should say. And honestly, I'm I will admit, her notes were very valid, and she goes into other business aspects of it. She she says, like, in order for you to be good too, is you have to study your algorithm, look at your analytics. But that's not the only thing you should look at. You gotta look at, how are you selling? Are you being consistent? Are you even interacting with your customers, not just through social media? Like, there has to be some sort of human interaction. And I'm just like, wow, I guess that's the piece that I thought I had down, but I don't. And that's when I had that reevaluation of myself, had the relaunch, like, planning, and I'm just like, my plan now going forward is to not only be more present, but to be able to showcase, like, what's going on with the brand, and whether it's at the model shoots or even just on a day-to-day, like, life, on my own personal stuff. But I guess with the business, like, showcasing that these are real people buying my stuff. There's also a message behind it, that it's just not a single piece of clothing. It's a lot more than, I guess, like a materialistic idea, I guess, is what I'm trying to articulate.
Yeah, it's the relatable aspect of being a human. Like
Yep.
people post on social media and sometimes forget that part of it too.
Mhm.
Like you have to be a person. Like
Yeah.
people need to feel like they can relate to you.
Yep.
And a lot of celebrities and very famous creators, it's hard to sometimes to relate to them.
Mhm.
And obviously you get to those levels of fame, it might
Yeah.
be hard to relate back
Oh, yeah.
average people too, or average everyday people, I should say. But when you're creating the brand and everything, it's going into that piece of you have to get comfort and there's no way around this.
Right.
If you're gonna be on social media and you're gonna promote stuff, you have to be comfortable on a camera in
Yep.
front of people and talking to people. Like
Mhm.
there's no way around it.
Yep.
And a lot of people are afraid to embrace that and go
Mhm.
through that wall because it's hard. We live in a digital age where
Yeah.
we're taught to just look at our phone and be on our phone, and we
Yep.
don't want to text everyone. No one wants to call each other all the time. Like we don't want to do that. We want
Yep.
to just text it. It's quicker. But
Yep.
having that conversation with that person is
Mhm.
going to make more of an impact
Oh, yeah.
versus just typing back a comment or replying to them. Obviously, do that, and the engagement's
Right.
important. Make them feel valid,
Yep.
but engaging in those conversations and live is maybe the best way on social media to do that.
Yep.
But having face-to-face conversations with your customers, if you're
Oh,
able
yeah.
to, is always going to be way more valuable than
Yeah.
just the social media aspect.
Yep.
We are getting towards the back end of the podcast. I want to start bringing us home with all this stuff. We've had really great conversation, and we're going to plug the sweatshirts one more time. But
Yep.
I want to give you how I've been doing this is kind of like your last words for the podcast. So whatever
Oh,
you
geez.
want to say, if you don't want to say too much, you want to say something short, sweet, whatever you feel is on your heart right now. I'll let you kind of have your last words.
Ooh, I'm gonna go cheesy with this one.
Just think about it. You're going to listen back on to this
Yep.
one. So
I guess it's on the idea of authenticity, but it's like 3 bullet points. It's, don't be afraid to be you. Don't be afraid to jump off the cliff, but also don't be afraid to have your guard up when it's necessary. I guess that's gonna be a little bit more woke later on in my life, but as of right now, that that seems to be my last words. It's just, you can be yourself at any time, and it's great, and to not be fearful of the unknown. Just dive right into it and see what it brings out, because you won't know what it brings. But also know your limits when it comes to, I guess, what your strength lies, whether it's your mental sanity or physical strength, or even just what you, as simple as, like, what do you want to do today? If you want to feel like doing nothing, do nothing. But having the strength to put your guard up in certain points in your life is very valid.
perfect. I think that's great last words for people and being willing to know when to protect themselves. Got to
Yeah.
protect yourselves in certain situations where people are going to try to take advantage of you. Unfortunately, we live in a world where people will try to do that and try to
Yep.
suck your energy essentially, and
Yep.
that's never a good thing. But Mark, I've always appreciated you coming on this podcast, and now we have a collab together, and now we'll plug that as well. So if you guys, we got these great sweatshirts that we made that will be released all through May
Mhm.
for Mental Health Awareness Month, and I will be plugging this throughout the month. And if you want to plug your website for that
Yep.
specifically, you can only get these on this website. It's the only place.
So it's theartisan-nb.com. Again, theartisan-nb.com.
Perfect. And like I said, limited edition. Get this now. Support the mental health. Stay kind to your mind. Come
Yep.
on, people. This is really important stuff, and I'm glad that we were able to collab on this. And
Mhm.
I look forward to our future episode to see where you are and to see where the brands are going. And I look forward to eventually one day seeing that store. Like, I know it's coming eventually. It's just, you got to keep following the path.
Yep.
You got to check all the boxes, and
Yep.
you're going to be down that path. But Mark, again, I appreciate you for coming on this podcast, and
Oh, thank
it's
you.
always a pleasure to sit down and talk with you.
Yeah.
For you guys, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your grandma. Check it out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch our podcast, go on YouTube or search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it'll pop up for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So, till next time, guys, peace.